two, 1, 2.
This is your time. This is your place. This is Flashback with West Britain on the Artist First Radio Network. Today's show is all about the blues and everything else that Maria Muldaur has been giving us over the last, 70 years or so. So I'm going to shut up now and put her on, and we'll join Maria in just a moment after a little bit of promo for Flashback with West Britain.
Hello, Seekers. This is Phil Proctor of the Fireside Theater, and you're listening to me or someone like me on West Britain's Flashback program. Flashback, back.
Hi there, this is Charlotte Stewart. You might know me from Little House on the Prairie. I was Miss Beagle. Or Twin Peaks. I was Betty Brake. Anyway, I just had the best time talking with Wesley Britton, and I hope you'll tune in Flashback and just have a wonderful time.
Hey, y'all, this is Kim Wilson of the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and you're rocking with West Britain on Flashback.
Okay, what is the name of your show?
Flashback.
Flashback. Okay, sorry. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Hello, this is Stephanie Powers, and you are listening to Flashback with West Britain.
This is West Britain, and you can meet my friends every Saturday and Sunday at 7 o'clock Eastern, here on the Artist First Radio Network. Well, all right, before we get today's interview started, here is a little bit of an afterthought to start things off. After Maria and I finished our interview for today, she had an observation that we should have thought of earlier, but we didn't. But she talked about it after the show was over. And I thought, well, what the heck? Let's put it at the top of the show here and let her lead into the conversation with this observation. So here it is. Here's Maria, and here goes the show.
One thing, if you lead into it, you could say something about, the sort of naughty, bawdy double entendre, that a lot of these songs had a sort of a spicy, risque vibe to them. This is Maria Muldaur, and you're listening to Flashback with West Britain.
Maria is sitting right over there, and she has a brand new album out. It's a tribute. She does tribute albums every once in a while. She did one to Memphis Minnie that I recall, and other folks. But this one's to Victoria Spivey, so we're about to learn all about blues in the 1920s when it all began. So let's bring on the Madonna of modern roots music, of Americana music.
Please. Don't call me that.
Okay. I just pulled that out of the air so we can quickly throw it away, no problem.
Yeah.
But Maria has touched just about every possible base in that term, roots music, Americana, whatever you like, that goes all the way back to jugband music and jazz and country and folk and all that kind of neat stuff. Because she was there at the beginning of the 60s folk renaissance back in Greenwich Village. Did I get that right?
You did.
Well, let's see. Why don't you share with the folks because you grew up in Greenwich Village, right?
Yes, Wes, I grew up in Greenwich Village, which was, and probably still is, but even more so back then, the epicenter of all things hips, all things.
Yeah, can you describe what the Greenwich Village scene was like back in the early days?
Well, when I was growing up, it was from actually early in the 1900s. It was sort of a mecca for all kinds of, bohemian, artistic, free-thinking types of people, artists, musicians, sculptors, poets, writers, and so on. So it was always a place where a lot was happening culturally. And when I was a young teenager, I started noticing a particular scene emerging, which was what they now call the folk revival of the early 60s, which was a time when a lot of people, mostly in the urban north, were starting to discover and explore all kinds of American roots music, bluegrass, blues, old-timey Appalachian music, gospel music, and learning to play it and learning, discovering all these great old traditional songs and so forth. And so I was a part of that scene, having always been drawn to music from the earliest time I can remember. And I was in a bluegrass band with a very talented young man who played the mandolin named David Grisman, who went on to great fame as a virtuoso on the mandolin.
Yes.
And I was also playing blues, singing blues and so forth. And then there was also a faction of people writing topical songs at the time, protest songs, and that included people like a young Bob Dylan and all sorts of people were on the scene at that time. It was a happening scene.
And back in those days, you kind of broke into things in a jug band. For those who don't remember or may never have known, what's a jug band?
Okay, well, I'll tell you the story about what a jug band is a kind of band that emerged in the rural South when the people in the rural South heard a lot of the early Dixieland jazz. They heard it on the radio, that was emanating mostly out of New Orleans. And they also, in those areas in the Mississippi and the Delta region and so forth, were playing blues. I mean, the blues was being just sort of originated and developed in the early 1920s. And but these people they wanted to emulate the sounds they heard, when they heard the New Orleans jazz bands, but they didn't have the money for a drum set, so instead of drums, they would take a washboard and put thimbles on their fingers and do all the percussive rhythmic sounds, just using pots and pans and washboards and whatever they had around the house and beating out rhythms on those. And instead of a big upright bass, which is also an expensive investment, they either blew into a jug to make the bass notes, or they wired up a wash tub with a big long metal string and made a bass out of that. And meanwhile, they could afford some of the instruments, but instead of a saxophone, they would play harmonica, which is known as the Mississippi saxophone.
Yep.
And they had fiddles, and sometimes they had kazoos instead of saxophones, and so forth and so on. So I was bouncing around the village, forming different little groups and learning to play the fiddle and so forth. And a couple of my friends came up to me one day, all excited, and they had formed a jug band, and there was this woman on the scene. She was an older black woman named Victoria Spivey, and I used to see her on the scene, and she had been a contemporary of Bessie Smith, and had been, and a lot of the early classic blues queens that recorded and had big hits in the 1920s. And but she had survived the following decades when music was very popular, and had moved to the New York City area, and was the first artist I know of savvy enough to start her own record label. So she would be out on the scene talent scouting for her record label. And so apparently she had seen my friends, fooling around with jug band music, and I guess she liked it because it reminded her of, music that was popular in her day, and she told them she'd give them a record deal. Well, they were just over the moon about that, because we were all just starting out, so we, the idea of actually making a record and having a recording and having a record out was beyond our wildest dreams. But apparently she went to one of their rehearsals and ended up telling them, you boys play real good, but y'all need some sex appeal up there. You have to understand, they were most of them were still in their, shall we say, Clearasil phase, okay, because we were all just young.
And here we're talking John Sebastian and who else?
And John Sebastian, David Grisman, Stephen Grossman, a lot of people that went on to huge careers later on. But this was like their first endeavor as a band. Anyway, she apparently said to them, why don't you need some sex appeal up there? Why don't you get that little gal I saw playing the fiddle, the one with the pigtails? Now you get her in your band and you'll really have something. So they came to me with this, and of course I asked the same question you did. My first question was, what's a jug band? So once they explained that to me, I said, well, yeah, that sounds like fun. Sign me up. So they did, and at that point, Victoria Spivey took me under her wing and started mentoring me, and she took me to her apartment and started playing the old scratchy 78s of all early blues singers, trying to find some material that would be suitable for my young voice, because, I was barely 20 years old, and it took me 60 years to develop the full-throated blues voice I have now, but then I sounded, like the young ingenue that I was. Anyway, she first played me Memphis Minnie. That's the first time I ever was exposed to Memphis Minnie's music. She played me a lot of her early material, as well as Bessie Smith and some of the other blues greats. And she just, was very interested in giving me pointers in how to perform. And, I think she saw something in me that I didn't even realize was in myself, and from far away, before she even ever met me. And so as a result of that, now here we are 62 years later or whatever it is, and I realized that I wanted to, that she had given me my very first opportunity to record and to be in a band, and I decided as a bucket list project I wanted to do a tribute to Victoria Spivey, because so many people are not that familiar with her and her amazing work and her amazing contribution to the blues. And if you ask even the average person, do you know who Bessie Smith is? Most people, even if they're not rabid blues fans, will know who that is. But my purpose in doing some of these tribute albums is to shine a light on some of the equally great but lesser known pioneers of blues and roots music who deserve to be remembered and appreciated even 100 years later. And I think that one of the things that bears that out is that in doing my research for what material to do for this tribute to Victoria Spivey, I came across so many wonderful songs that, even though they were written over 100 years ago, are still relevant and still resonate with a modern contemporary audience.
Well, a lot of those lyrics she's saying were kind of really pushing the edge. You'd think they'd be more controversial than I guess they were, but I wonder if she saw something like that in you, because you have that same kind of courage.
Well, maybe she saw something. I don't know what it was, but she saw it. She kind of drew it out of me and gave me great encouragement. She'd say, "Now, honey, listen. I want you to listen to me and listen good. When you get up there, it ain't enough to sound good and sing good. You got to look good, too." She said, "You got to get up there and strut your stuff and make all eyes be on you." And then she leaned in close and pointed her finger right at me and said, "That's what they call stage presence." And she said it like with such emphasis, and all I could do was say, "Yes, ma'am." And I took it all in, and God bless her. I hope I'm doing her proud all these years and 44 albums later.
Oh, I think you are. I can easily see you as being kind of her spiritual heir, because the way you sing her songs, it's almost like she's in the room with you.
Oh, my God, that's really a very nice thing to say and a real compliment. That means a lot to me, because that's what I try to do, is not so much copy her, because that's impossible, but just to channel the spirit of somebody who was a very spirited person. That's what was amazing about her. She just had a lot of spunk and spirit, and as with a lot of these early blues women who are all heroes of mine. You know, they all sang, they liberated themselves decades before anybody dreamed up the idea of women's liberation. You know, they came up against, you know, there were racial barriers, social barriers, financial hardships, and just societal, you know, taboos of the day, and they expressed their sexuality very freely and with a lot of gusto and humor, I might add, which makes these songs so much fun to sing. Yeah. And they just were their own independent people and brought a lot of spirit to their music. So I appreciate your saying that about my performance on these songs.
Oh, I just love this album. By the way, didn't you say somewhere that Victoria also was there at the beginning of Bob Dylan's career?
Yes, she was the first person to record Bob Dylan way before Columbia Records ever got a hold of him. She saw him playing harmonica. You know, every Monday night was Hootenanny night at this club called Gertie's Folk City that we all hung out at. Yeah. And she was always there on Monday nights scouting talent for her label. And her label was also, I think, she created it to provide recording opportunities for a lot of the veteran blues artists that were of her generation that were no longer, you know, regularly recording on a blues label or whatever. And she would round them up and, you know, produce sessions on her label. And she got young Bob Dylan to come down to the studio and play some harmonica on some of these blues recordings. And there's a photo of him and her that he put on the back of one of his earliest albums, I think as a nod to her. In fact, we put a little reproduction of that photo in our liner notes, because just in telling the story of like how influential she was and how much she was, you know, a part of the scene that was emerging at that time.
Now, as immersed as you've been in her musical catalog, how did you pick the songs that ended up on? We never told the people the album name. It's a 1 Hour Mama.
Let's say the question again. How did I pick the songs?
Yes.
Well, by listening to hundreds of songs, she was very prolific, and then narrowing it down, you know, by process of elimination till I had the 12 songs that spoke the most to me, that were the most unique, and had the best lyrics and best arrangements, and the ones that just personally spoke to me. Like one of the ones she wrote, a mournful blues called Don't Love No Married Man. Oh, you know, she wrote that over 100 years ago, but people, it's the same old story, whether it's 1920 or 2025. The story's all too familiar, and a predicament many a woman has found themselves in. And so that one really jumped out at me when I was listening to dozens and dozens of songs a day. And I'm kind of proud of the arrangement we did. I got my keyboard player, Chris Burns, to play mournful piano on it, and got a wonderful sax player named Johnny Bones, who plays in the very popular group, the California Honey Drops. They came down to the studio and we did that one together, and I love the way that one turned out.
Well, what else would you like to share about your career? My goodness, you've got how many kids' albums out there, for one thing?
Yeah, I did quite a few children's albums for a wonderful label called Music for Little People a while back, and they had a intention of creating very high-quality music for kids by approaching real artists, you know, artists that were successful artists in the grown-up realm of music, and getting them to put together kids albums, and they got people like Taj Mahal and all kinds of people. And at first, when they approached me, I had never thought of doing a kids album, but I loved the idea, and so I put together a list of great jazz players in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we did a bunch of tunes. I did about 4 albums for them, and they were something I'm still proud of. Now I meet, I guess, the kids that grew up on those albums. They come up to me and said, "Oh, my mom played your albums for me all the time," and so that's cool that I could reach talk about a younger generation of about 5 years old,
Yeah, that's reaching out to every demographic I guess there is. Well, since we're jumping around in time doing flashbacks, as it were, why don't we take a trip back to 1973 when you kind of broke out with a big hit called Midnight at the Oasis. Can you tell the folks the story of that song?
Well, I was making my first solo album for Warner Brothers Records, and it was sort of an accident that I came about to make the record, and it was an opportunity that was presented to me that it wasn't something I had really ever thought about doing very much. So I found myself in the studio with all these amazing musicians. Anyone I asked for, they got, because those were the good old days when budgets were money was no object and budgets were unlimited. And so I was doing a very eclectic album, just finding a collection of songs I happened to like and that resonated with me. And I had a Dolly Parton song on there. I had a Jimmy Rogers song on there, the Singing Cowboy, Jimmy Rogers. I had a Naughty Bawdy New Orleans blues called "Don't You Feel My Leg."
Oh, that's still a classic.
Yes, it's one of the most requested tunes in my repertoire.
I believe it.
But anyway, and then I had some tunes by some contemporary songwriters that were really good, like the McGarrigle sisters. I did a song called The Work Song, and there was a young guitar player named David Nickturn, and I had fallen in love with a little song he had written called "I Never Did Sing You a Love Song," and it was a very pretty little country waltz. So there I was making the album with all these aforementioned great musicians. And, and I was in over my head because I had been in a band called the Jim Kweskin Jug Band for about 9 years, and also in a musical partnership with Jeff Muldaur, my husband, and the father of my one daughter. But we had just recently broken up, and so this was my first time trying my wings as a solo artist. So I was going along making the record, and David Nickturn was so excited that I was going to do his song that he drove out to California on his own dime in the dead of winter in his little VW Bug, and he was just hoping maybe they'd let him play rhythm guitar on his song, anyway, he was hung around and he was being very encouraging to me, and so one day, and they did indeed let him play guitar on his song, and so one day when we were almost finished with the project, the producer Lenny Warnica came in. And he said, I've been listening to the tracks, and we have some great slow ballads, and we have some cool up-tempo songs. I think if we had one more medium-tempo song, I think it would really round the album out, and we'd be in good shape. He says, can you think of anything? And David was standing right there, and I looked at him, and I remembered this goofy little song he had written about a year before, And I said, hey, David, that song, Midnight at the Oasis, is that a medium-tempo song? And he whipped out his guitar and said, yes, it is. And he started playing it. We played a little bit of it for the producer, and he he wasn't crazy about it, but he said, that's cute. You want to do that? And I looked at David, and I was full of gratitude to him because he had been so encouraging to me during this difficult and challenging time. So we said, yeah, well, let's do that. So that very afternoon, we called up a great bunch of musicians and laid down the track, and the rest is history. That one little gesture of gratitude and that last-minute idea I had, just ended up capturing everybody's imagination. And not only was it a hit and stayed on the charts for months and months here in the States, but was a hit all over the world, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And I was nominated for 2 Grammys because of it. And so I still do the song because people still love to hear it. And by the way, I've been nominated for 6 Grammys in my life and haven't won yet, but I'm not giving up.
Well, keep the nominations coming. That's kind of the main thing, is people appreciating your music.
Yes. So I'm very grateful for that. I had speaking of Don't You Feel My Leg, I did a tribute album to the gal that wrote and recorded that song originally, Lulu Barker, and that was I got a Grammy nomination for that in 2019.
And, of course, there's Christmas at the Oasis out there for folks looking for offbeat Christmas songs. Is that a good way to put it?
I call it Christmas Tunes for Hipsters. It's a collection of Christmas tunes that mostly from the 20s and 30s, jazz and blues Christmas tunes, all by fabulous artists. In fact, one Victoria Spivey song is on there, and people like Louis Armstrong and Louis Prima and people like that, all who wrote really cool, off-the-wall Christmas tunes. It's a nice antidote to the sort of very kind of sentimental Hallmark, if you will, kind of Christmas tunes that you hear over and over again. It's just something a little different.
Yeah, it is. I think that one's on Global Recording Artist. Oh, yeah, when you were back, your guitar player was Craig Craftfall. Is he still around?
Yes, he is. He's been in my band for almost 20 years.
Well, tell him I said howdy, because I interviewed him once a long, long time ago.
I sure will.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to say about Victoria and this new album, or what's your next project?
Well, please, it is only coming out tomorrow. Give me a chance. My next project is going to be to make sure everybody knows about my new album, 1 Hour Mama, and hopefully tell more and more people about Victoria Spivey and what a great contribution she made to the blues and to American music. And that's it. And to just keep on performing as long as I can. I just did a great double bill with Elvin Bishop, who does a duet with me on this album, which you should mention. And also Taj Mahal does a duet with me on this album. So it's got a lot of fun stuff on it, and I hope your listeners will enjoy hearing it.
Oh, I certainly hope so, because there's a lot of nuggets that are on there. And, folks, if you haven't yet, you can check out her webpage, because there you can find out all of her concerts. And, of course, you'll be lucky if you're in California, because then you might actually get to see her sometime. You ever come out to the East Coast this way anymore?
Well, I have up until very recently, and hope to again. So just look on my website, and you'll see if I'm coming to a theater near you anytime soon.
Well, now that your record label's in Lancaster, and that's just down the road from me.
Well, that we are cooking something up for September, so stay tuned.
Okie dokie, we'll do that. All right, well, we're going to go out. We should play one more song from 1 Hour Mama. What was the other song you picked out, Maria?
Was it TB Blues?
Yes, it was.
TB Blues is one that I think it's a really plaintive song that Victoria Spivey wrote, and it resonated with me because I myself had TB twice when I was a kid. A minimal case of it, but in the days when Victoria Spivey had written the song, of course, TB was a often fatal disease.
Yeah.
They didn't have much of a cure for it. And I just loved the way she did it, and I recorded it with James DePagny and the Chicago Jazz Band, and I really like the way this one came out. I really felt like I was channeling Victoria Spivey on this particular one.
I can hear it and I can believe it because I hear both Victoria and I hear Maria, and that's the way it should be in an album like this. Hope you go check out 1 Hour Mama. You won't be disappointed if you're a blues lover. And there's an album for blues lovers. So with that,
thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Maria, for appearing on Flashback with West Britain.
Well, we hope you enjoyed today's exciting episode of Flashback with West Britain, your open window of fresh air and new perspectives with experiences shared from entertainers from every walk of life who've influenced our lives in so many ways over the years. Come back every week for more FWB. And while I'm thinking about it, next time you're at Facebook, stop by the Flashback with West Britain Facebook page, hit the join link. No quizzes, no questionnaires, just your opportunity to get weekly bulletins of who's coming next on FWB here on the Artist First Radio Network.